We were going to be asking for massive tax cuts, and we're now going for a phase 2.
Larry Kudlow is the president's new top economic advisor. So who is he?
I've known the man for 30 years. He stands for growth. Cut taxes, grow the economy, return to prosperity.
We're all moved by your eloquence and your fearless insistence on action to prevent gun violence.
It's sad to see the left use these young people for their own political agenda.
The Pulse shooter's wife knew of her husband's plans to carry out that deadly massacre and even helped to scout out locations. Prosecutors making those claims during opening statements.
This is something that you're expert in. Is Elizabeth Warren a Cherokee Indian?
No.
Recently, I noticed an increased amount of my take-home pay. What that means for me is an opportunity to reinvest or invest in my daughter's college education.
Daylight savings time finally paying off, right?
Yep, it's light later in the day. We love that. Easier to get back from the grocery store.
Yeah.
We dash to make supper.
We are messing with the sun. Special thanks for the sun for cooperating. We're really enjoying this adjustment.
All right, let's talk about tax cuts, because President did phase 1, right? Many of you got bonuses. You were at Cox Radio yesterday. You said everyone's getting $2,000. It's amazing. Well, the president was speaking in Missouri yesterday, and he hinted around that there's going to be phase 2.
Right. This is the second time this week we've heard him talk about phase 2. First time we talked about it, nobody had ever heard about it. But then yesterday at Boeing, where he's in front of business leaders from throughout Missouri, all benefiting from the tax cuts, he talked about phase 2, and he mentioned Kevin Brady. And later, Kevin Brady was quoted on Fox Business as saying, yep, we're working on something. If you missed the president, here's his comment from the Boeing factory floor.
This was about the first place I announced that we were going to be asking for massive tax cuts, and everybody said it'll never happen. And we got it not only passed, but bigger than anything ever passed in the history of our country. And we're now going for a phase 2. We're actually going for a phase 2, which will help, in addition to the middle class, will help companies, and it's going to be something I think very special.
Well, we'll see. It'll certainly another tax cut, especially with the midterms looming, might help to benefit the country. Let's talk about the person who would have to implement a lot of that, and that's Larry Kudlow. He's going to be the president's chief economic advisor, taking over for Gary Cohn, and he comes with a rich background. Believe it or not, he started as a Democrat, anti-war protester. He obviously changed as he entered into working for the New York Fed, and then went on to work for the Ronald Reagan administration, the OMB department, and then comes back and worked for Bear Stearns for a while, ran that company, went through a period of time where he talks openly about his addiction, overcame it, and then works his way back and became, as many people now know, one of the premier commentators in all of business news, and he's a very successful radio show as well, and him and the president have had a long-term relationship, and that explains why he's going to get the job. However, they don't agree on everything. They don't. But they've been friends for a long time. He advised him along the way throughout the campaign, and he said these tax cuts are so important to individuals. He knows he knows that you're stressed out about money. He knows you're trying to put food on the table. You want to pay for your elderly parents or put your kids through college. And he says he wants to make these tax cuts permanent, and that's the first thing he's going to work on. Listen.
Individuals deserve a permanent break. That's very important. Elon's right. I'll add some more to it. Talk about capital gains, possibly lowering the rate, but possibly indexing them for inflation, which is something many of us have argued for years.
Is that your first agenda item, to make the most of the tax cuts the administration has already passed to show what the benefits are to everyone?
It's going to be one of them. It's going to be one of them.
Okay, so there you got Larry over at his TV home at CNBC for a little while longer. Perhaps that is what phase 2 is. Phase 2 is making these individual tax cuts that were cut with the big law that went through a couple of months ago, making them permanent. That would be good for all of us. We will talk to Kellyanne Conway, counselor to President Trump, live at 8 a.m. and ask if she knows more about phase 2.
Also, we'll ask about, too, there's some other shakeups. I mean, there's rumors of some changes with the president's cabinet. John Kelly, General McMaster could be out. and also Shulkin, who's running the VA and is going into some personal turbulence lately. He could be out. I would hate to see McMaster and Kelly leave, especially at a time in which they're working some sensitive issues as they look into chemical weapons over in Syria, as they see what's happening in North Korea, and the need to come up with a coherent policy before their one-on-one summit in May.
We're going to ask Kellyanne Conway about that coming up. She's going to be on our show. President also yesterday was praising the House for passing the Stop School Violence Act. What's in that act? $500 million in grant money over the next 10 years to focus on several things. Training the schools to communicate better with law enforcement so they can make their schools safer, and find out the potential that, or any potential crimes that could happen. They're gonna be able to I guess find these criminals or look at these red flags and notice them before these kids actually go in.
Right. It would also create an anonymous reporting system for threats of school violence. I mean, you look at what happened down in Florida. So many dots were not connected. Had people just spoken up and then the feds or the local authorities acted, perhaps it would not have happened. The President of the United States did tweet this out regarding this, which passed 407 to 10. He said, today the House took major steps towards securing our schools by passing the Stop School Violence Act. We must put the safety of America's children first by improving training and by giving schools and law enforcement better tools. A tragedy like Parkland can't happen ever again. And the House agrees with the president.
Also, I think Senator Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham are moving for a piece of legislation that would allow states to move preemptively should the next Nicholas Cruz start talking aggressively. And when schools express some concern, they'll be able to move. In a situation where the president famously said, you know, worry about due process second. Well, this is really what they're saying. This guy, or usually it's men, or this young man could potentially kill somebody, kill a spouse, tear up a school. We're going to be able to empower law enforcement to act that way. Yeah. I think that is going to be key. I think Connecticut's doing something similar, and they're saying it's successful.
Yeah, the gun issue, that's an ongoing debate. This will actually make the schools safe immediately. That's the House's version. Senate's working on their version, too.
Meanwhile, we have been talking a little bit about this. You saw some of the images yesterday. It was National School Walkout. This was an event originally to commemorate it lasted 17 minutes, 1 minute for each person killed at Parkland. However, it was organized by the youth empowerment part of the Women's March on Washington, same people who did that. And ultimately, it was a political event because what they were trying to do was trying to pressure Washington into more gun controls. If you missed some of what the Democrats said yesterday, we've got a little montage. Listen to this.
People are sick and tired of gun violence, and the time is now for all of us together to stand up to the NRA. Gun control!
Enough is enough! We're all moved by your eloquence and your fearless insistence on action to prevent gun violence. Thank you for bringing your urgency to this fight to the doorstep of America.
She fruitlessly tried to get a chant going, and the crowd ignored her right after that. But I'm just amazed at this. I think it's great that kids are active. I think everybody is horrified over the last 20 years. Seems like every 3 months we're looking at another horrific shooting, although Broward County is always going to stand out as one of the worst. However, in the big picture, logic tells you that it should be security that should be part of this conversation, where most of those protests were all about taking aim, pun intended, at the NRA. And I'm wondering where that comes from with a bunch of 14 and 15-year-olds.
Well, ultimately, it was about gun control. And the schools organized it with the backers of this. It became a political event. A lot of people didn't realize that when they watched the live images yesterday. We had Diamond and Silk on about a half an hour ago. You know, they are big Trump supporters. They say essentially that the political left using these students all across America to push an agenda. They didn't like it.
It's sad to see the left use these young people for their own political agenda. And I think that what I would have liked to have seen is them marching against Bernie Sanders, who was standing there with all of his armed men around him that had guns.
That's right.
That's what they should have been doing. Or marching against some of these Democratic officials that live in their cities that have ran them down in the ground and are not concerned about the gun violence that's even happening in their communities.
You know, and we just had a woman by the name of Julie Gunlock with us, and she said, look, the school coordinated with it, and she said, what other political causes does your school get involved with? I mean, clearly, you know, this is a polarizing issue across the country. A lot of people look at Parkland, they said that guns should be locked down. Others say, look, so many dots were not connected by the feds. They had the chance to stop it, and they dropped the ball.
In my school, okay, go ahead.
3,000 kids participated. 3,000 schools participated. 185,000 students participated.
The way I understand it with my school, I have one 9th grader and one 11th grader, separate schools. The high school were told, go in the back of the building, no signs, just go out 17 minutes and, you know, keep your thoughts basically to yourself. Someone to the front of the school held up signs. They got himself in trouble. 9th grade, they stayed indoors because the weather was so bad. But they did. I think it's fantastic to give a tribute to the 17 children who lost their lives.
Yeah, and maybe it'll send a message to people who are not so good, some of the, you know, future attackers.
I just wish some of the cops that are guarding our schools, and that in my case it is, they're allowed to carry. They spend 40 years learning to use a gun, fighting. All of a sudden they retire. They're not allowed to carry guns in their schools. I hope that comes to an end.
That's what the president's been talking about, hardening the schools. All right, meanwhile, 7-Eleven here in New York City, and time for some headlines.
Good morning to you guys. Happy Thursday. Let's get you caught up on some of your other stories that we're following. 2 Navy pilots killed after their jet crashed in the water during a training flight off Key West. A source tells Fox News the F-18 Super Hornet was flying on one engine when it lost the other one at low altitude a mile from the runway. The president tweeting his condolences overnight, writing, "Please join me with your thoughts and prayers for both aviators, their families, and our incredible U.S. Navy." A criminal investigation now underway into a puppy's death on board a United Airlines flight. A family says a flight attendant made them put the dog in an overhead bin from Houston to New York. And now we're learning United mistakenly sent another dog to Japan. It was supposed to land in Kansas. Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana now proposing a bill to ban animals from overhead bins. Since 2015, 41 animals have died while traveling with United. A military family gets a lot more than a show at a Nashville Predators game. They had no idea a very special guest was waiting in the wings.
My knees are about to fall out from under me.
Army Specialist Edwin Crosby hugging his wife Brandolyn. The soldier had been stationed in South Korea for 14 months. And I say it every time, but they never get old watching those videos.
You can watch them all day long. Yep. So happy. Pure happiness, joy.
Yep.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. President Trump meeting with some of the many Americans that are grateful for his tax cuts.
Boeing is a company that invests in its veterans, like me, its people, and the community. Thank you.
Come in. Thank you.
That Boeing manager is going to join us live next with how the tax cuts are changing her life.
And talk about a perfect match. A man is giving his wife the gift of life for their anniversary.
I notice an increased amount of my take-home pay. What that means for me personally is an opportunity to reinvest or invest in my daughter's college education. Boeing is a company that invests in its veterans, like me, its people, and the community. Thank you.
Come in. Thank you.
That grateful Boeing employee out in the St. Louis area, and our next guest, one of the many thanking President Trump for the tax cut benefits during his visit out to Boeing yesterday. Hazel Jean Mims joins us right now live from St. Louis. Hazel, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Okay, the Fox News Channel covered this business roundtable where there were a number of businesses and employees who wanted to talk a little bit about how the tax cut had impacted them. And you started by saying, I was looking at my paycheck, I got more money in my pocket. What did you want to tell the president?
I wanted the president to understand exactly what that meant for an individual. Right. The tax cut actually impacts our lives. And for me, wanting my daughter to live out her dreams, it was a great opportunity to show him my appreciation on how I would utilize those funds.
Sure, and I know you're going to put that into your daughter's college fund. College, very important to you. You joined the Army National Reserves, rather, so that you could go to the University of or Alabama State University, ultimately because you knew how important education was.
Absolutely. My brother asked me, as a high school student, would you like to attend college? And I said yes. And he said, well, how do you plan to pay for it? And I started to ponder that thought in my mind. And he at the time was in the military and encouraged me. So I joined the Army Reserves, and it was an absolute great decision. I say that it's the best decision of my life.
Sure, absolutely. And we heard the president of Boeing yesterday say that tens of thousands of veterans are employed by Boeing. Nobody got bonuses at Boeing. Instead, they used the funds from the tax cut for education and veterans assistance for the employees. And that's really important, isn't it?
Absolutely important. And what I really like about it is that Boeing used crowd sharing to solicit the ideas and the opinions of its employees to directly get their feedback and how we'd like to see those funds reinvested. The feedback received for more than 40,000 employees ranged from technological development training courses to rotational programs. Personally, I'd like to see the company utilize the funds to allow employees to take training while working as well. Yeah. So a great opportunity there, and I really appreciate Boeing soliciting the decisions or the ideas of its employees for that.
Absolutely. I'm sure Boeing is listening. I know the president was listening to you yesterday. Hazel Mims, IT manager at Boeing out in St. Louis. Hazel, thank you very much, and congratulations for telling your story to the president yesterday.
Thank you.
You bet. All right. All right, 7:20 now here in New York City. Actor Sean Penn writing a novel calling for the assassination of the president, who sounds a lot like Donald Trump. The disgusting details coming up. And our next guest went from being a migrant worker to an Army soldier to an border agent. No place I'd rather be. Time now for your news by the numbers. First, 45 minutes. That's how long passengers were left hanging upside down after that roller coaster stalled out. Unclear at this point what triggered a safety sensor stopping the Batman ride at Six Flags Over Texas, nonetheless stuck up there for 45 minutes. Next, 130 pounds. That's the weight of that monster fish, which is bigger than the 68-year-old woman who caught it. Sue Ellock reeling in the bass grouper during a fishing trip in Australia. It was 130 pounds. And finally, $10,000. That's how much a Silicon Valley billionaire is willing to pay a company to kill him and preserve his brain. Sam Altman wants Nectome, as a company, to digitally upload the contents of his brain. The process, they say, is 100% fatal. But then he feels he will live on forever. That's some of the news. All right, Brian and Amy.
All right, President Trump visiting the border in California and stressing the importance of a border wall and those who protect it.
The border wall is truly our first line of defense. We must enforce our laws and protect our people. And I have to say, law enforcement, ICE, Border Patrol, all of the people that have been so good to me for so long, they're really doing a job.
So what do the agents who protect the border daily think of President Trump's efforts to secure our border? Joining us now is U.S. Border Patrol agent Sergio Tinoco. He also served 10 years in the U.S. Army and worked at the DHS. He details his journey from being a migrant worker or coming from a family of migrant workers all the way to becoming a soldier. In this book right there, it's called Proud American. Sergio, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Brian was on the border and met you. You told him about your book. Then
Yes.
I went to the border with the vice president a few weeks later and met you again.
Yes.
So you are there. You're first line of defense on our border down in the valley. You grew up there. Tell us your story and if a wall works.
So I believe Fox News released or aired the video Walls Work last week. And I can say personally that they do work. You know, it has to be a combination of the wall itself, the infrastructure, access roads to be able to access the traffic that we have to counter or that we counter on a daily basis, technology, and then personnel.
All right, so that's the combination. But you need portions of this wall built right away. And I think Kristen, the Homeland Security's Secretary Nielsen, she was saying that you need 1.8 million to start to finish off certain areas. They're just wide open right now in the El Paso section.
Well, El Paso, I really can't speak to El Paso and how much wall they need or they require there. I work in the Rio Grande Valley sector, which is down in the southern tip of Texas.
What's the biggest challenge you have there? Yeah, what do you need?
So we do need that combination, right? The infrastructure, the access roads, the technology, and the personnel.
Tell us how you became a border agent and what your story is, your background.
So I grew up a migrant worker. I come from a family of Mexican immigrants, right? And I grew up a migrant worker because I was raised by my grandparents. My mom still lived in Mexico my entire life. She didn't become a resident alien until after I left the military back in 2003. So having been raised by my grandparents in Texas, they were migrant workers themselves, so I had to start working in the field since the age of 7. From the age of 7 all the way through the end of high school, pretty much, I worked in the fields. To break that family cycle, which is very tough to do, I joined the military, and I served 10 years in the U.S. Army. In those 10 years, I deployed to Bosnia. Saw some things there and did some things there. After leaving the military, I said, I need to continue my federal service, right? I was already proud to be a soldier. I wanted to continue serving my country. And what better agency than the U.S. Border Patrol?
So you are a citizen.
Yes, sir.
Were you able to reach back and, as part of the chain migration, bring other people here?
The only person that I ever petitioned for is my mom.
And how did your family react to this? Because I know you wrote the book. I mean, your story is incredible. You, Army border agent, overcame addiction to alcohol, awarded a Foreign Medal of Honor. You're an inspirational speaker. You're an author. I want to ask you why this title, Proud American, and what your mom's reaction was to you becoming a border agent.
So, with regards to my mom's reaction, and at least to the writing of the book itself became a therapeutic process for me. My mom was a single parent my whole life. I'm an only child. So when she passed away, I felt completely alone. I didn't know how to express that, especially with the fact that, or knowing that she didn't know half of my life. She didn't know everything I did in the military. She didn't know the things I had encountered in the Border Patrol. So in order for me to express that or get that off my chest, my wife recommended that I write it. And so when I did, as a therapeutic process, I wrote it, showed it all to my wife. It did help me because I hadn't spoken about the military experience in 18 years. She read it and she says, honey, you have a book. And it evolved from there. And now it still continues to help me in a therapeutic way because now I get to go speak to kids that were in my situation, they're migrant workers, their families, and be able to inspire them.
About breaking the cycle, because that's not where you start, it's where you finish. And that's America provides opportunity, no guarantees.
And some of your family was upset with you, right? Because you were arresting people that were trying to come over the border, and meanwhile, you were arresting, they said, our people.
Yeah, so it's a dilemma, right? Because they were upset for that, but they just didn't understand. They didn't understand the pride that I had learned to have for country and for first responders that are willing and able to sacrifice so much for the country or for a purpose. And it was tough for me to explain that to them, and more so because I still have family in Mexico.
Sergio, what does being a proud American mean to you?
You know, that's been a dilemma, Ainsley, my entire life. My entire life, people have seen me, they've taken a look at me and said, you're just a Mexican kid, you're not gonna amount to much. You know, or you come from a migrant family, a very poor family, you're not gonna amount to much. And so my entire life, I've been able to prove that wrong. I've been fighting and struggling and still continually every day try to improve myself to be able to prove that wrong.
All right, it's all in that book. It's now out, Proud American. Good job, Sergio. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
And
for
hopefully
having
you guys
me.
will be getting the reinforcements you need.
Thank you so much.
And your mom is smiling in heaven. She is proud of you.
Thank you so much, Ainsley.
Thank you. 2 police officers ambushed and killed in cold blood. Now the guy who lured them in and pulled the trigger is about to walk free for good behavior.
And we're answering your financial questions all morning, like this one. What do you do if you're 28, have $80,000 in student loans, and still living at home? The Ramsey team is here with advice for John, the floor manager.
Good morning. Welcome back. We have some headlines for you. A convicted cop killer will soon be a free man. Herman Bell granted parole after spending nearly 45 years in prison for the murders of not one, but two NYPD officers in 1971. As a member of the Black Liberation Army, he helped lure officers Joseph Piagentini and Waverly Jones to a New York housing project. Piagentini shot 22 times and Waverly shot once. The 70-year-old is set to be released next month after showing good behavior and remorse. Actor Sean Penn writing a gruesome novel about a man wanting to kill a president that sounds eerily familiar to our current commander-in-chief. In the book, called Bob Honey Who Just Do Stuff, a fictional character writes an angry letter about America's leader saying, quote, "You are not simply a president of impeachment. You are a man in need of an intervention. We are a nation in need of an assassin. Tweet me expletive. I dare you." Penn first published the book and the novel in 2016 under a fake name. A burglar breaks into a home through a baby's nursery window. Just look at this. Disturbing moments caught on surveillance video in Florida. Police say the masked man opened the window, ransacked the home, and stole several $100s worth of jewelry. No one was home at the time. And forget flowers or jewelry. A Florida man gives his wife a kidney for their 23rd anniversary. That adorable Monica Kai has a condition that requires 8 hours of dialysis a night. She says finding out her husband really was a perfect match was like winning the lottery.
God knew what he was doing when he put this man in my life.
Just the simple fact that she doesn't have to be hooked up to a machine, that's very important for her. It brings me joy and happiness, and it brings us closer together.
Doctors say it's rare to find a match between spouses. Let's look at your headlines. I will send it to Janice.
Hello, good morning. Yes, we are out on the plaza here. It's a little chilly for this time of year. And you know what? We could actually be dealing with another nor'easter next week. I know, and it's supposed to be the first day of spring on Tuesday. So we still have some snow showers across the eastern Great Lakes. That's going to be ongoing with that westerly flow. The West Coast remains active with more rain and mountain snow in the forecast. And this is some of the energy that's going to move across the central U.S. heading into Friday and Saturday, bringing both snow, freezing rain, sleet, and rain across the southeast. And this is what is going to potentially make our next nor'easter, I know, Monday into Tuesday. So this is this is the GFS model, and that's a pretty formidable storm as we head into Tuesday. That's our first day of spring. So yet another nor'easter. Buckle up, my friends. Steve will keep you up to date. Back to you.
All right. Thank you very much. You are officially sounding like a broken record with all this nor'easter talk. Meanwhile, from paying off the IRS to student loan debt, we're answering some of your financial questions this morning. Join us right now from the Dave Ramsey Solutions team. Dave Ramsey showed up along with Christy Wright, Anthony O'Neill, and Ken Coleman. Good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
All right. Dave, you get, because you run the operation, you get the first question.
Okay.
All right. Ron from California writes, I'm behind on IRS payments. That sounds ominous right there. With 2018 taxes due soon, should I prioritize paying off the IRS debt?
Absolutely. Absolutely, you need to do that. You do not want to put anyone ahead of the KGB, the IRS. They have unlimited power to mess with your life, and they charge a lot of interest and a lot of penalties. So we always put them first. And the other thing I kind of think I hear in that question is you haven't addressed what's causing this.
Yeah.
So you need to get around behind this so that this, this problem doesn't continue. You need to dig this out by the roots.
Right. At least he's dealing with the IRS, and rather than just throwing their notices in the garbage.
You don't have a choice. They're going to deal with you. They're going to deal with them.
All right, Christy, next up. Emily in New Jersey writes, I was denied the chance to sell in the two biggest craft shows. The market is saturated. How do I succeed? Now, this sounds like something up your alley.
Well, it's interesting because now is a great time to start a side or small business. However,
which you have done.
Yes, I have. But it's very popular. Because it's so popular, it's easy to get into markets that are saturated. So if you're going to do something that other people have done, you need to either create products that are different in some way, or market them in different places or in a different way. So you basically need to know what makes you unique. Why should someone buy from you versus the competition? Now, your unique position doesn't have to be the only thing you do well, and it doesn't have to necessarily be something that no one else is doing. This is just the angle you're going to lead with in your marketing. When you identify that, then you help your customers know why to choose you. And if you don't know it, I guarantee you they don't know it.
Well, look at Starbucks. They didn't invent coffee. They just did. They burned it and then charged you $4 for it. All right. right. Meanwhile, Anthony, here's a question for you. Victoria in Pennsylvania writes, I'm 28 and I have $80,000 in student loans. I don't have my own place. What should I do? And she's looking to you for divine intervention. You used to be a pastor.
Hey, you know, Victoria, I want to encourage you. Hey, it's fine that you don't have your own place. What I want you to do is stick to the plan. Number one, set aside an emergency fund, and I want you to attack this debt. Remember, debt is robbing you from your future. So I want you to get that under control, get it paid off, set aside 3 to 6 months of expenses, and then, hey, let's start saving for a home. Don't get so focused on buying a home. I'm 33, and I don't even own a home, you know, but I'm excited because I'm debt-free and I'm going towards there. So you're almost there.
All right. Ken, here's a question from David from Washington. I found my passion, but I'm not sure it will replace my current pay. Should I make the leap anyway? Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, and Steve, a lot of Americans watching right now are in a very similar situation. The answer really is not yet. I want you to keep getting better and better and better. And as you're getting better, you become more marketable and more valuable. And the best way to do this is to do it as a part-time gig, either for someone else or for yourself. And this is good in two ways. One, you're making more money, saving more money, and you get to a point where you can either jump full-time for someone else or launch your own business. So it's a scale that current job, stay there. It's your platform to allow you to leap smart.
Ultimately, I think we'd all like to do something great in our retirement, but there was a new statistic that came out. In the United States of America, the average working woman has saved for her retirement $34,000. That simply is not enough, but you know, there are a lot of families that don't even have that. So real quickly, lightning round, what's one thing somebody can do today to help save for their retirement? Mr. Ramsey?
All the data that we find on millionaires tells us that it's pretty simple. They live frugally, they live simply, they avoid debt of all kinds, and that frees up their income to invest in 401ks and Roth IRAs. It sounds kind of boring and simple, but that's what the data is showing us that the millionaires are doing, and that's the opposite of having $34,000.
Right, Chrissy?
Yeah, it's interesting because on average, women earn less, save less, invest less, prepare for retirement less, and on top of that, we live longer. And so it's really important to simply be intentional. You can't think about saving money. You need to actually transfer the money and save your money for retirement.
Quickly, Anthony.
I'm telling millennials, start right now. Start as early as you can. Open up a growth stock mutual fund and invest as early as you can.
Ken?
What do you need to give up so that you can go up? It's about sacrifice.
All right, very good. Guys, great. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
All right. If you have questions for Ramsey Solutions, email us, friends@foxnews.com. We'll pass them along. Meanwhile, the Pulse nightclub shooter's widow now facing a judge for her role in that deadly massacre. What the first day of court has revealed, we're going to explain that. And Hillary Clinton's list of excuses for losing keep getting bigger and bigger. But radio talk show host Howie Carr says he knows what happened, and he just wrote a book on it. He's next.
All right, the widow of a terrorist who gunned down 49 people at the Pulse nightclub in 2016 in Orlando is on trial in federal court. Her name is Noor Salman, and she is charged with aiding and abetting her deceased husband, Omar Martin, in planning the attack. He was an Islamic extremist. She pleaded not guilty. So, how much did she know, and how will prosecutors be able to prove their case? After all, it took a while to put together. Here to weigh in is former Deputy Assistant General under George W. Bush, Tom Dupree. Tom, what is the most damning evidence against her?
I think the best evidence the prosecution has is her confession. After this attack happened, federal agents interviewed her, and they wound up getting a long signed statement in which she basically admitted she knew what was going to happen. She's fighting that. She's saying the statement was coerced. It was basically forced out of her. But it's obviously a very difficult thing for the defense lawyers to try to get around when your client admits to a lot of the stuff.
So the night of the shooting, they go to her house while the shooting's still taking place, and she's in bed. And she had to be woken up. There's also text messages of she saying to Omar Martin, her husband, "Where are you? I can't find you." And then he wrote back, "Have you heard?" And then she came back saying, "I love you." So it looks as though she didn't know exactly what she was up to, unless that's part of the ruse.
Yeah, and that's what the defense is going to hang its hat on. They're going to say that these text messages show that she wasn't a willing accomplice. Now, I think in fairness, you can read these text messages both ways. And I think the prosecution can point to text messages that show she was trying to concoct a cover story with her husband if people were asking where he was. They're also going to use evidence that she might have helped him actually case possible targets, that she might have gone shopping with him for ammunition. So I think the prosecution has a lot of evidence they can put before the jury to show that she wasn't a victim or an innocent person caught up in this, but was a knowing and willing participant in the scheme.
It's so interesting because we know with the Boston bombers, too, there was a wife involved that we knew, we speculated on how much she did or did not know. But here, it took a while, but Tom, they are going full steam at her. There's a problem with knowing what somebody's up to and not saying anything.
There is a problem, but at the same time, the prosecution has a slightly higher barrier here in that they're going to need to show that she somehow helped him out or associated herself with the venture. Now, I agree with you that if you know someone in your family is up to committing some horrific terrorist attack, you have a moral obligation to act and to stop it.
Right.
But the prosecution here is going to need to show that she knew more, that she did more than just know about it, that she somehow associated herself with what her husband was trying to do.
All right, so we look forward to seeing this case put together. What she's looking at is life in prison. That's what prosecutors are going for. No death penalty?
Well, the prosecutors right now are pushing for life in prison. And I got to say, if they convict her, particularly on the aiding and abetting terrorism charge, she is going to be facing a lot of hard time behind bars.
It was carnage. It was done for ISIS/Al-Qaeda, and she knew about it. That is unbelievable. Tom Dupree, we'll see where this court case goes.
Great, thank you.
All right, 11 minutes now before the top of the hour. Coming up, Hillary's list of excuses for losing the 2016 election, they just keep on growing. They're getting really embarrassing. But radio talk show host Harry Carr says she has no one to blame but herself, and he'll yell at us about that. Plus, still ahead, Kellyanne Conway here live about the changes in the White House. Dana Lash about all the talk of guns, not protection yesterday of schools, and Steve Hilton about the Russians, the UK reaction, and so much more. Don't move. All right, the widow of a terrorist who gunned down 49 people at the Pulse nightclub in 2016 in Orlando is on trial in federal court. Her name is Noor Salman, and she is charged with aiding and abetting her deceased husband, Omar Martin, in planning the attack. He was an Islamic extremist. She pleaded not guilty. So, how much did she know, and how will prosecutors be able to prove their case? After all, it took a while to put together. Here to weigh in is former Deputy Assistant General under George W. Bush, Tom Dupree. Tom, what is the most damning evidence against her?
I think the best evidence the prosecution has is her confession. After this attack happened, federal agents interviewed her, and they wound up getting a long signed statement in which she basically admitted she knew what was going to happen. She's fighting that. She's saying the statement was coerced. It was basically forced out of her. But it's obviously a very difficult thing for the defense lawyers to try to get around when your client admits to a lot of the stuff.
So the night of the shooting, they go to her house while the shooting's still taking place, and she's in bed. And she had to be woken up. There's also text messages of she saying to Omar Martin, her husband, "Where are you? I can't find you." And then he wrote back, "Have you heard?" And then she came back saying, "I love you." So it looks as though she didn't know exactly what she was up to, unless that's part of the ruse.
Yeah, and that's what the defense is going to hang its hat on. They're going to say that these text messages show that she wasn't a willing accomplice. Now, I think in fairness, you can read these text messages both ways. And I think the prosecution can point to text messages that show she was trying to concoct a cover story with her husband if people were asking where he was. They're also going to use evidence that she might have helped him actually case possible targets, that she might have gone shopping with him for ammunition. So I think the prosecution has a lot of evidence they can put before the jury to show that she wasn't a victim or an innocent person caught up in this, but was a knowing and willing participant in the scheme.
It's so interesting because we know with the Boston bombers, too, there was a wife involved that we knew, we speculated on how much she did or did not know. But here, it took a while, but Tom, they are going full steam at her. There's a problem with knowing what somebody's up to and not saying anything.
There is a problem, but at the same time, the prosecution has a slightly higher barrier here, in that they're going to need to show that she somehow helped him out or associated herself with the venture. Now, I agree with you that if you know someone in your family is up to committing some horrific terrorist attack, you have a moral obligation to act and to stop it.
Right.
But the prosecution here is going to need to show that she knew more, that she did more than just know about it, that she somehow associated herself with what her husband was trying to do.
All right, so we look forward to seeing this case put together. What she's looking at is life in prison. That's what prosecutors are going for. No death penalty?
Well, the prosecutors right now are pushing for life in prison, and I got to say, if they convict her, particularly on the aiding and abetting terrorism charge, she is going to be facing a lot of hard time behind bars.
That was carnage. It was done for ISIS/Al Qaeda, and she knew about it. That is unbelievable. Tom Dupree, we'll see where this court case goes.
Great, thank you.
All right, 11 minutes now before the top of the hour. Coming up, Hillary's list of excuses for losing the 2016 election, they just keep on growing. They're getting really embarrassing. But radio talk show host Harry Carr says she has no one to blame but herself, and he'll yell at us about that. Plus, still ahead, Kellyanne Conway here live about the changes in the White House. Dana Lash about all the talk of guns, not protection yesterday of schools, and Steve Hilton about the Russians, the UK reaction, and so much more. Don't move.